10.3 are on conditional statements. Our essential question is, what are the different parts of a conditional statement and how do I write its converse? Okay? There are two parts. Conditional statements have two parts. Conditional statements have two parts. Conditional statements have two parts. Part one is called the hypothesis. Part two is called the conclusion. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. Conditional statements have two parts, the hypothesis and the conclusion. The hypothesis is everything after the if. And I put if in quotations. The conclusion is everything after the then. So we have these two parts. We have this hypothesis and we have this conclusion. And the hypothesis is everything after the if, and the conclusion is everything after the then. So let's start off with a conditional statement that I wrote down last year. And it may or may not be true because it's conditional, but let's just write it down anyways. It says this: if you have a driver's license. This is not from the worksheet, but it's very close. Yes, it's an example. If you have a driver's license, then you can drive a car. If you have a driver's license, then you can drive a car. What your worksheet's going to do is it's going to ask you to underline the hypothesis. It'll say like this: hypothesis will have one underline underneath it, and your conclusion will have two underlines underneath it. Your hypothesis will have one underline underneath it. Your conclusion will have two underlines underneath it. A conditional statement gives you a condition. If you have a driver's license, then you can drive a car. If you have a driver's license, then you can drive. What's the hypothesis here?
If you have a driver's license, then you can drive a car.
You have a driver's license. We only go after the if. Everything after the if. You have a driver's license. That's what we're going to do. We're going to underline it. Right?
That makes no sense though.
Okay.
Because if that's not even a statement. If you have a driver's license.
Not if. We're not using the if part. The if lets you know it's the hypothesis. You have a driver's license is the hypothesis. You have a driver's license. That's what you have in your pocket. I have one. It's in my wallet. then you can drive a car. That is your conclusion. So what we're going to do is we're going to underline you can drive a car, but we're going to do 2 underlines underneath you can drive a car. Do I underline the if? No. Do I underline the then? No. Those are your key words to let you know where the hypothesis is and where the conclusion is. Okay? So sometimes you will then be asked to write things as a conditional statement. This is a conditional statement. They have 2 parts, right? Sometimes they don't have the 2 parts already there for you, and you have to turn it into it. Hang in there, Con. Thanks, bud. For example, this one is number 5. The slope of a line is the same thing as the rate of change. There's our statement. It's just a regular statement right now. The slope of a line is the same thing as the rate of change. Now, I need to convert this into a conditional statement. I need to add the words if and then. I think you sit next to Trey. It's either him or next to Robert. Yeah. So let's start by rewriting. If you have the slope of the line, if you have a slope of a line, comma, then you have the rate of change. All you have to do on number 5 is add the words if and then and still make the sentence make sense. Read it. Make sure that it's understandable. Use common sense here. If you have the slope of a line, then you have the rate of change. I didn't write the same thing as. I chose not to. You could have tried to incorporate it, but it just made more sense when I deleted those words. And now, this is conditional. Okay, so then when I turn the page of this thing, we're going to have to know how to write something called the converse. Converse. A converse is a statement that switches the hypothesis and the conclusion. So, for example, if I asked you to write the converse of this previous statement that we just wrote down, if you have the slope of a line, then you have the rate of change. The converse would be if you have the rate of change, then you have the slope of a line. The converse is where you switch the two things, but you still write it if and then. I'll go back up here. If you have a driver's license, then you can drive a car. Okay? That is a conditional statement. If I want to write the converse of this conditional statement, if you can drive a car, then you have a driver's license. Now, that's how you write the converse. Sometimes the converse is going to be true. Sometimes the converse is not going to be true. Think about that. Let's do the converse. If you can drive a car, then you have a driver's license. Is that a true statement? No? Do you know anybody who doesn't have their license and knows how to drive a car? Are there any of you in here who know how to drive a car, but you do not have a driver's license? Yeah, exactly. There's about 15 of you with your hands up right now. I learned how to drive before I turned 16. So, and I didn't even have, well, even before my permit. Don't tell my dad, okay? Okay. So, converse, statement that switches the hypothesis and the conclusion. An example, I'll do number 11 with you guys. Here's number 11. 11 says, if 3 points are not on the same line, then they are non-collinear. The directions say write the converse. Is the converse true or false? If false, give a counterexample. If false, give a counterexample. That's literally what the directions are for numbers 11 through 14. Just like you were thinking about that driver's license statement, some of you knew that I can drive a car. I know this guy who knows how to drive a car, and I don't have a driver's license. That's a counterexample. You're proving it false by providing one example. Okay? We actually had 15 examples in here. If 3 points are not on the same line, then they are non-collinear. Write the converse. That's the first thing we need to do. When I write a converse, think of it being something that is backwards from each other. Or something, when I think of a conversation between this person and this person, I think somebody's going to do this and then somebody's going this. So I think of the if going this way and the then going that way. They're going to switch just like a conversation. Just like the words of a conversation. So, if 3 points are on the same line, then they are non-collinear. How am I going to write the converse? If, what do I write next? If you could say if they are non-collinear. If you want to be more specific, you could say if 3 points are non-collinear. You could say that as well. If they are non-collinear, then the 3 points are not on the same line. I don't know if you remember, because this is Unit 7. In Unit 7, I talked to you about what collinear means. Collinear, the definition of collinear was on the same line. So when we had Unit 7, I had that point A, point B, point C on the ceiling, and point D. And I told you that point A, point B, point C, point D on the ceiling, they were all collinear. You remember that? That's how I showed you what collinear was. If they are non-collinear, if they are not on the same line, then the 3 points are not on the same line. Is that true or false? True. That's a true statement. You do not have to come up with a counterexample if it's a true statement. Okay? So, I don't think I want to do anything else besides that. That's where I want to stop your notes.